Looks good. Welcome everybody to our regular weekly AMA. This week, someone put the topic yesterday of Soulbound NFTs. I'm happy to talk about that. And we have a bunch of people that are working on related projects to Soulbound NFTs here. So like I see Billy here and I've been working on it. So, we're happy to answer questions on that. Also any other questions. So that's kind of what we do here. So does anyone have anything particular on their mind? So I don't see too many people from outside our kind of like our core community, but yeah.
I see one. Constantine, welcome.
You're welcome, Constantine. Good to have you here. If anyone has, Kevin just showed up too, so we'll let Kevin in. But yeah, anyone who has any topics that they would like to talk about, any questions, go ahead and let you get the conversation started. And we're here to answer. Welcome to the new people. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Johnny Quest. We're discussing anything that you want to discuss and, possibly Soulbound NFTs if you want to talk about that. So whatever you want to do.
It's probably worth, just for posterity's sake, defining what is a Soulbound NFT and why we think BrightID is a useful part of that conversation and that tech stack.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So I've heard, so Vitalik put out an article on Soulbound NFTs that kind of got people thinking more about it, definitely got us thinking more about it. And I mean, I think people know the gist of what a Soulbound NFT means. It means that, basically means that it's, so I think most people get the part that it's non-transferable. They maybe don't think deeply about why or how it's non-transferable, or I guess how it's non-transferable. But the main point that they get is that it's non-transferable. But then in the Soulbound article here, let me bring it up so we can like read through it together. But let's see, share my screen and I will open it up. Okay, so let's go to Soulbound by Vitalik and skim this over. Okay, so he talks about what it is. What if NFTs could be soulbound, like a POAP? What if governance rights could be soulbound? That'd be cool. So implementing non-transferability in practice. So that's interesting.
And let's stop there for a second. And so the B-Main DAO, which was the first DAO that BrightID got involved in, has a non-transferable governance token that is effectively soul-bound, not by anything, but just by group consensus, right? The DAO mints them to an address.
Yeah, right.
And that person has no ability to, you can't transfer that, right? Is it true that you can't transfer an Aragon governance token?
Yeah, so here's the thing. So that's a really good point that you just brought up. So they are soulbound, but the reason they're soulbound is kind of interesting. So yes, those tokens are non-transferable. So that's the starting point. But then what's to say, who's to say that what happens if you lose access to that account? What happens if that account gets stolen from you? Now it's not really soulbound anymore, is it? It's tied to this address that you no longer control, or that someone else might control in some way. So yeah, so anyways, the thing that makes it, that can still make it soulbound, is this idea that the DAO itself can figure out and make changes. So this has actually happened in the past. where a member of the DAO will come and say, hey, I can't access that Ethereum address anymore, or I want to change to a different Ethereum address. And then the DAO will revoke one of the tokens and then issue a new token to that person. So that keeps it bound to the person and not just an address. So it's kind of like that's the method to actually make it soulbound. So when he talks about here, he says that it's proof of humanity. It says that one NFT that's robustly non-transferable is a proof of humanity attestation, and that's because you can revoke that NFT, and so it's got kind of this like clunky way of revoking the NFT by invalidating your own profile, and then so you lose that attestation. So if you say, hey, I no longer control this account that I linked my proof of humanity to, then you're basically revoking that proof of unique person attestation. And so that the attacker that stole it from you, or if you lost access, you don't get that. They don't have that anymore. And then I guess what he doesn't say, but the next part of the process is you would have to reapply using a different address. So anyways, that's kind of how that works. And
interesting side thought is that in proof of humanity, so you vouch for other people to get them into the registry. This does not address what happens to the people you vouched, right? If I've got a valid account, I vouched for other people, I invalidate my account. Does that have any downstream impacts on the people that I vouched before? I don't know.
I think it might actually, which isn't good. That's not a good model. But we should talk to them about how they solve that. But yeah, like what happens if someone vouched for you? Because BrightID solves that problem, but I can't think of how proof of humanity does it. Maybe they have some way to do it, but I can't just immediately think of how they might do that. But yeah, if you lose access to that address and that address vouch for other people, does that have some sort of snowball effect if that voucher gets invalidated? Yeah, that's a good question that someone should ask them. And then he talks about privacy, which is really interesting. So I think we'll skip over privacy, or we don't have to skip over it. But anyways, I think the thing that we want to talk about though is like the how. So the only example he gives of how is the proof of humanity, which allows you to revoke it yourself, which is good. It's good to have that option. So the way that it works in BrightID is,
Adam, before we go into that, I also want to say that you could also just have a non-transferable token that could, right? That's already a thing that can be coded. We've all been airdropped shitcoins that we can't make leave our wallet because they set the transfer off. But that's setting it to an address, and an address is a poor proxy for a soul. We all have lots of addresses, and there's all sorts of ways that you can either lose access to an address or give someone else access to an address.
Right. So so some people think of soulbound just meaning non-transferable, and I saw someone post. Actually, it was a ETH Denver talk. I can't remember her name because I don't know her, but she gave a pretty interesting talk on like why we should be using off-chain solutions, like off-chain verifiable credentials from decentralized identities using identity wallets that are not on-chain, because of the problems of a public blockchain and because of the problems of tying everything to an Ethereum address. But I think she was talking under the assumption that all that Soulbound meant was that it was non-transferable. But and so a lot of people kind of think that that it just soulbound just means non-transferable. But like you said, that the account is like an Ethereum address is not a good proxy for a person because you can lose access to it, like I mentioned. So so you need something else, and Vitalik knows that, and he said, well, how do you like practically do this? He mentioned the proof of humanity example. So imagine that. So with BrightID, the way that it works is using your BrightID, which is basically you get that from the people that you know, and they also help you manage that, so that if you lose everything, you can just do social recovery and get it back from the people that you know. And that's how it really becomes soulbound, because if you have it linked, an NFT linked to your BrightID rather than linked to an Ethereum address, then now it really is soulbound. And so anyways, we created some smart contracts to do that, to link in a privacy preserving way, to link your BrightID to an NFT that could then, we have this thing called a rescue command that's really interesting. So a rescue operation. So if you can move a soulbound NFT out of a wallet, even if you don't control that wallet. So you can kind of like yank it out of a wallet if you don't have access to that wallet anymore, or if that wallet's been compromised. So let's say an attacker steals your account, moves it around, moves your NFT around, puts it, does all these fancy things to like move it into some other account off in some corner somewhere. You can just yank it back into a new account. You make a new Ethereum address, register it, and then yank that soulbound NFT back. So that's pretty cool. And so that really does make it soulbound and bound to your BrightID, which you can recover a lot easier potentially than an Ethereum address. So that's kind of the basis of that. Maybe there's some questions that people have about anything about soulbound NFTs at all, or anything else. So there's some interesting uses for it. So Vitalik talked about using them for like certifications and stuff like that. And those are really interesting. There's also kind of like a fun aspect of it. So imagine that, because we haven't really seen these, but imagine if you had just kind of like a fun NFT that stayed with you for life. So it's different because you can't sell it. So it's not like most NFTs that people are used to, because you can't like go and trade it around. But maybe what you can do with it is you can upgrade it. Maybe you can buy things for it. You can buy other soulbound items for it, and you can customize it and things like that. So that's where it becomes interesting. And so I think if you were a creator of something like this, the revenue model becomes much different, because instead of making royalties out of it being swapped, I think you charge fees for allowing people to collect items for it, or mutate it, or do other things to it. So it's a different revenue model, but it still could be really interesting. And then the cool thing is, like, it stays with you for life. It's yours. And so you kind of treat it differently. So it's kind of like, if you guys remember digipets and stuff like that, becomes something sort of like that. So that's kind of fun.
In the current NFT world, a lot of people like to get NFTs to flex. Like that's one of the reasons that the prices have gone so high on some of these things. If you flex with your soulbound NFT, then it's like all flex, because you're not going to exit the position.
That's right. Like like that money, that is a sunk cost.
Right,
like it's not like, oh, look at how rich I am. I have this Lamborghini and I had this crypto punk, and then tomorrow you don't have them anymore because you sold them because you were just like pretending to be rich or something.
Well, right. So you know, we in the NFT world, people like to be mean and make fun of each other for being paper hands and lettuce hands and all
Yeah.
this. Um, if you do it on the Soulbound, like it means more. You know, are you involved or are you committed?
Yeah, if you buy stuff for your Soulbound NFT, like that's stuff that only you get to enjoy. Like you don't swap that to somebody else. So that's like totally different, totally different type of flexing.
Right. So people right now, you know, there's NFTs for sale to support Ukraine, and a lot of people are like, hey, I would like to do that. And some of them are doing it just because they want to support Ukraine. And some of them are doing it being like, hey, maybe I can buy this on the cheap now and sell it later for more to be extractive. If it's a soulbound kind of thing, all the support is going. You don't have that out, which somewhat, like, you know, clearly there'll be less speculation, but it means more. It's for keeps.
Yeah. So it's a totally different type of NFT. Really interesting. So it'll be interesting to see if those catch on. I mean, I think they will, just because of the novelty aspect of it. So I don't know like like what the eventual market cap will be between like regular transferable NFTs and soulbound NFTs, like which will become which people will dump their money into more, but I think both will become popular.
One of the things I've been seeing a lot in some of the investment DAOs I'm part of is really excitement about membership cards.
Yep.
The Proof Collective by Kevin Rose is a really hot example right now. There's 1,000 of them, and it gives you access to the Discord and lets you mint things and whatnot. But it's a sellable thing. There are all kinds of communities where the community would want to say, "Hey, I'll let you in, but it's you I'm letting in. I'm not just giving you a ticket that you can pawn off to the next person. I want you specifically in this community." And yeah, will be interesting to see how all that plays out. There's all these allow lists now for minting NFTs. Well, like that allow list could be a soulbound NFT. Like it's a ticket that, hey, if it's in your wallet, it opens these doors for you.
One thing that could mirror the whole idea of the soulbound NFT and people investing is kind of like, I think I mentioned it before, but tattoo communities, because that is something you put art into and you can't transfer that to someone else. It's an expression of you. So like people put thousands of dollars into their own body. So I'm like, why not their own digital form? That's the ultimate flex. Is like, I'm the Yakuza, something crazy like that, that identifies you. As long as there's variety of it, it can identify you as your soulbound NFT.
Yeah, totally. And also, I mean, when you go into a tattoo parlor, how cool would it be? You get your awesome tat that's going to stay with you for life. And then you also get an NFT to go with it. So you can, I mean, I think it'd be fun for the artist to be like, hey, I'm a tattoo artist, and like, here's my collection of NFTs. And yeah, these are soulbound NFTs. Like they stay with the person that got the ink.
Got it.
Yeah. That'd be pretty cool. So yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff that could be done with that. So one of the let me pull up there's actually, I wrote an article on just some of the use cases that I thought were cool, but that's a pretty sweet one that I hadn't thought of. So let me pull up this article. So it was like called Soulbound uses or something like that. Uses for soulbound NFTs. Yeah. So this is on the forum, BrightID forum. So some of the ones that I thought would be interesting would be obviously achievements, attendance. So that's something that Vitalik mentioned, like POAPs make a lot of sense. A membership, that's what Philip just mentioned. So good behavior is an interesting one. And we talked about digital objects that stay with one owner. So good behavior is one that I think is really interesting. So let's say that a new DAO is accepting members. And BrightID is an interesting kind of like gate that you can use for your DAO. You can say, we want to make sure that there's only one of you in our DAO, so we want BrightID to be part of the gate to get in. But there's some other interesting ones. Like you might say, okay, you've got to be a unique person, but you've also got to prove to us, and here's 10 different ways you can prove it to us. You got to prove to us that you're like an upstanding citizen in, whatever the DAO, greater DAO ecosystem already. So you've got to, maybe it's not like a newbie DAO. Maybe it's like, we want you to have some experience or something, or at least maybe with some other related communities. Show us that you're a well-behaved member of one of these other related communities. So they could say, okay, take your pick. Here's 10 credentials that we'll accept. Show us the proof that you have one. You don't have to reveal your identity to do this. You don't have to reveal everything about your identity, just that you have that particular proof, and then you can get in. So that does bring up that already starts to hint at some privacy issues, because of like what wallet addresses people use and stuff like that. So, but that's a real interesting thing to be able to say, hey, if you want to join our DAO, prove that you have like a good track record on Gitcoin or Rabbit Hole or these other 5 things, like maybe these 10 DAOs that we like. If you can show us that you've learned how to use these and you're not an attacker, they can give you like a stamp of approval, then you can bring that over here. Because Gitcoin does an amazing job of, like, they go above and beyond looking at all sorts of different signals that BrightID doesn't have access to about whether someone's a Sybil or not. So they can tell, like, if they give you their stamp that says, hey, you're not a Sybil in Gitcoin, you use Gitcoin and you're not a Sybil, that's a pretty like strong signal that you could bring into another DAO. So anyways, I think that's really interesting. And those should be like a token like that should be soulbound. Gitcoin should not issue that to an Ethereum address because of what we talked about. Like, someone could buy your Ethereum address, someone could steal it from you. They should issue it to a real person. Like, they should use a BrightID soulbound NFT to issue that verification. And that way it stays with the person, and they're really talking about the person when they do it. So so we talk about how I talk about, like, briefly in here how you could do that. But that makes perfect sense to me. I could see Rabbit Hole making a bunch of new quests around soulbound NFTs, like, get these soulbound NFTs, earn some money from Rabbit Hole. They're going to pay you some money to earn these NFTs. I think it'll be really cool.
Yeah. Another thing I want to mention is binding an NFT to your BrightID Soul is an action that you take, not an action that can be done to you.
Exactly.
I've received tokens into my wallet that I didn't want. So I once received a tiny bit of hex token, $1 worth. I don't care, but I have nothing to do with text, no interest in text. Nonetheless, when I did my DGen score back during the fun times, I got docked points on my DGen score for the fact that my wallet had interacted with the hex contract, even though I had never interacted with the hex contract. That was done to me. So I certainly don't want that. Like, there it is, dinging my reputation when I didn't even do it.
Yeah.
I'm sure other people have worse examples, but
yeah, you get a badge of shame, and you don't want that. So no, that's another huge problem of this narrow thinking of that an Ethereum address represents your soul, because then someone can, like, put black marks on your soul and there's nothing you can do about it. So yeah, but if you, like you said, if you bind it to a BrightID, it's opt-in. You have to approve receiving a BrightID Soulbound NFT. So yeah, the way the current contracts work, you have to, there's a linking step that you have to do ahead of time, and you link what we call a context ID. In the BrightID Soulbound NFT world, we call it a context ID, which says that I'm linking my BrightID to this context ID in this context. And the context could be an application. That's pretty common. It could be a network, could be something like a collection of DAOs. It could be like a snapshot registry that's used by a bunch of DAOs. It could be a Discord registry that's used by a bunch of servers, or it could be like something that's very local to one. So that's a context. So you link your BrightID to a context, and then that context has within it basically an approval that you've signed by with an Ethereum address. So you have to approve that this Ethereum address can be used in this context. Otherwise, you cannot receive you cannot receive the NFT associated with that context. So unless you go to your BrightID app and say, I want to link the Gitcoin, I want to link Gitcoin NFTs to my BrightID so that Gitcoin can give me NFTs. Unless you do that step, Gitcoin cannot give you a BrightID Soulbound NFT. And they're not gonna, so if they do give it to, if they do issue it to your Ethereum address, then now it's totally in your control to, like we said, move it around. So they initially issue it to an Ethereum address, but they can track it by the token ID. All NFTs have token IDs. You can track it using your BrightID, and so you both have ways to like manage that token. So if they want to, let's say they want to revoke it, they want to say, okay, you're now a bad actor. We just found out you were Sybil. We're going to revoke this badge. They can just go in and add that token ID to a blacklist or something, or remove it from the good list or whatever they're doing. And then from your side, if you can do all this rescue stuff. If if you lose access to the wallet, you can rescue it. So it's a really nice solution, both from the issuer and from the receiver, and avoids all the problems of simply using an Ethereum address. Okay, questions about B2. So I think we're changing topics now, which is fine. Yeah, if you have questions, if anybody watching this has questions about any of this stuff, come into our Discord server. We have lively discussions about Soulbound NFTs and everything. Also our forum. But we're switching topics now to B2. I have several connections with members of the BrightID team and other projects, but I don't have in Gnosis, but I don't have B2 verification. So the thing about getting connections with members of the BrightID team is, yeah, the nice thing about being connected with members of the BrightID team is we all have good B2 scores, but the difficulty with that is, I assume that you're saying that you don't actually know us. You're just kind of like, hey, nice to meet you. I'm going to make a connection with you. And that's fine. And you can do that in BrightID. And of course, we'll label it just met. And just met does not increase your B2 score. So I think that's where you're running into a problem. So B2 is a really slow process. This is where a lot of people find it challenging, because they're used to maybe the meets verification, where it's like, okay, show up at this meet someone for the first time, and you get this meets verification. And that's a much lower level of verification, but it's very fast. But with B2, you actually have to know the people that are helping you to increase your B2 score. And so they're not going to just mark you as already known. There's no shortcut. Let's put it that way. There's no shortcut. So you got to slog through it. Yep.
This is an interesting case with this particular user. So I just looked up this user on the Explorer. I'm not going to share specific details, but he has lots and lots of connections. Certainly a lot of them are just met, but he's got a good number of already known connections and recovery connections. When I'm looking at the graph, like this looks like probably.
So he's put some work in.
Yeah, you're right. Has no progress in B2 yet.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, so he basically, I think this is just, I mean, so when you get started with B2, it sounds like Jose has done all the right things. And that's, that's good. I think the next level up is to kind of follow up with the people that you're connected to, already known, and check their progress and help them to take the same steps you have, because then you benefit from the network effect. Unfortunately, B2 kind of peters out if you make a bunch of already known connections. That's great. If none of those people engage with BrightID and do the same thing that you do, it kind of just stops there and you reach a dead end. So this is why it's a long, slow process, is because you sort of have to, I mean, you could say wait for your friends, but you can also kind of like encourage them and push them to make more connections. But you've got to like wait, sort of like just wait for stuff to happen or encourage stuff to happen. And it can take a really long time. Like I kind of think that the thing that's going to jumpstart it is things like Aura, because like B2 doesn't have a built-in way of jumpstarting this sort of process the way that Aura does. So I don't know. Does anyone else have opinions on B2? I mean, for me, it's really easy. I'm trying to put myself into other people's positions. For me and all my friends, it's easy, but you go like 2 or 3 or 4 hops out, it suddenly becomes really hard to get B2 verified. Any ideas? Yeah, I think that I'm excited about the launch of Aura, because Aura has it kind of has more suggestions of like how you can improve your Aura score, even if you start out kind of isolated. But B2 doesn't really have anything like that built in. I mean, I know Maddie's kind of vision for bootstrapping the already known connections is to like focus on community hubs, like universities was something that we were thinking about. I mean, if you think about it, that's where Facebook got started. That's where Bumble got started. A bunch of social networks start out with universities because it's just like this social hub. And so I don't know. I don't think we have any rollout plans for doing anything with B2. I think we kind of just launched it and that's it. And my focus, as far as like finding the social glue for everything, my focus has been more on Aura. So maybe I think, is Mana the only thing that's using B2 right now?
Yeah.
Maybe they'll switch to Aura once it becomes available. But I would recommend, like, I think we've talked about Aura switching, or sorry, Mana switching to like a lower B2 level, like 1 or something like that. I don't know.
And well, there's certainly people that have trouble. They get some, but not 5. In this case, it's still at 0. Like it hasn't made any. So lowering it to 1 doesn't fix.
Yeah.
Doesn't actually fix the problem.
Yeah.
Kevin, do you have something?
Yeah, I just what's up, guys? Good morning. Sorry I was late. The tying into the B2 thing, I haven't really even started that. I keep meaning to look it up and figure it out, and then I get distracted. But I guess my question right now is, what's the level of functionality, or what are the limitations I have with my BrightID account when I go to use it, which I really haven't for anything outside the community yet. Being that I have, I guess, 7 out of 9. So I haven't set up social recovery and I haven't set up B2. What kind of things does that unlock when I complete those tasks?
Yeah, so far, well, social recovery is a really good one, because
Right.
that allows you to, if you do get verified in different apps and start to and make a bunch of other connections and start to have put work into BrightID that
And
would
get a
take you a while
Soulbound
to-
NFT.
Yeah, get a Soulbound NFT, stuff like, yeah, once you get one of those, you definitely want to set up social recovery. So once you start to get things that kind of like you've put in some effort into your BrightID, and then it starts to become like it would become a pain if you had to start all over again. So that's where the social recovery becomes important.
Right.
You set that up, and with this, the people that you choose as your social recovery connections, they don't have to, like, they can just be barely BrightID users. They can just be doing it as a favor to you. So there's a couple people that I have as social recovery connections that haven't used any BrightID apps and haven't made very many connections, but I use them because it's a person that I know, that I really trust, that I know is not going to like steal my account from me. So that's who you should choose as a social recovery connection. So once you reach a certain point where you've done like a fair amount of work in BrightID or engagement, then definitely set up social recovery. And then as far as B2, the thing that it unlocks for you is it unlocks mana, which is this interesting kind of UBI, like universal basic income like experiment, where they give out mana tokens to verified unique humans. So that's so far that's the only thing using B2. But if I think if B2 can overcome this hurdle that we were talking about, where it's like it's a struggle to get adoption, like it's really slow right now. And that's kind of just the way it naturally starts out. But if it can overcome that hurdle, then I think it'll be used by everything. Like I think it'll replace what all the other apps are using right now.
Sure would be nice to replace the like 20 steps of onboarding into everything.
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing, so we right now people are coming to meets. 3 years ago, when we were sort of rolling out BrightID, meets didn't exist. All the onboarding happened sort of directly peer to peer with people in the real world that you were interacting with.
Yeah, and I don't mean just BrightID. It's like, there's always layers with every project or group, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't get rid of all the Web3.
Easier than getting a passport. Like all the steps that you have to do to KYC with like an exchange or a bank, or the steps you have to do to get a passport or even like a plane ticket or something like that is it's like BrightID should be way simpler than that.
Yeah.
Sorry, what were you saying, Philip?
I felt like the comment was like bleeding into Web3 is really hard. There's all sorts of pain and frustration points involved. BrightID is not going to fix most of that. Like, I'm sorry, I just can't. Like MetaMask is an absolutely essential tool to those of us living in the Web3 world, and I can usually use it pretty seamlessly. I use it every day. But man, when I bring in a new person that's never had it before, it's rough when you walk them through the steps that they have to do. They don't get it. They don't know what to do with that information. They don't have a way to process all of what you're telling them. Not that any of the steps are particularly hard, but just it's weird and different. And wait, what do you mean I need to record these words on paper and don't let anyone see them, but don't save it on my computer anywhere, but don't lose them? Like, it just, it's tough.
Yeah, and like all the pop-ups signing like a ton of different transactions and trying to figure out what that even means. But yeah, so yeah, there's that learning curve, but I think one area where BrightID has the potential to help with some of that is that social recovery is a really nice way to recover access to things, whereas like seed phrases and multi-sigs and all the other things that we do are not as intuitive and easy. Social recovery is pretty easy to do. Like you can do it in a couple minutes, and you just reconnect to the people that you set up as your social recovery connection. So
in fact, Adam and I did that yesterday for someone, and it was smooth. Like they got their account back in no time.
Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying definitely about like BrightID is not going to make Web3 easier in and of itself, but am I hearing correctly or understanding correctly that there's all kinds of potential use cases for, you know, getting people through the, I mean, kind of the equivalent of a universal password, if you will, and sign in, you know, that, I mean, even for Discord channels, you know, you got to go through and you got to, yep, you're going to have to read rules still because each channel or server is going to have different rules. But you know, all these layers of interaction of signing up, like, is that a pathway that you see that like, oh, one of the first things I'm going to do when I get into this whole Web3 thing is connect with BrightID, set it up, because it's going to make getting into and connecting to everything so much quicker and so much easier and reduce time and effort and complication while protecting.
Wasn't this problem that we set out to solve? The problem that we set out to solve is the problem of ensuring unique accounts within an app. So making sure that when you come to an app, that you're not bringing multiple accounts. So like a better CAPTCHA is one way to look at it. So, but does that help with the registration process, like being able to register more easily? Well, you know, like if you look at OAuth, which is like a Web 2 technology, they've done a good job of making it really easy to put all your trust in Google and just like use Google to sign in everywhere. And so, you know, I think the easiness is not, I don't see like a difficulty signing in to a bunch of different things and like making tons of different accounts, because I think OAuth kind of solved that, but they solved it in a way where you could be decentralized. So that, I don't think they knew that they were going to make Google like the king of all logins by doing that, but because you can set up your own OAuth server and authorize yourself everywhere, but like that's just not what people do, and it's not easy. And so the easy way is just to use Google for everything, and so that's what everybody does. And so I think what we want to do is we want to avoid the security issues that come with that sort of centralization. So if we can have it so that you so that your login is kind of like specific to that app, but still easy to come by. So like you log into an app, and that doesn't, there's no way to kind of like link together a bunch of your logins to a bunch of different accounts. Also, there's no centralized data storing like records of your logins and things like that. So those are the types of problems that we want to avoid. So I think we can help with stuff like that. I think BrightID can help with stuff like that. I don't see it being like any easier than the Google experience though. But yeah, but we started out privacy first, and we started out saying, okay, well, the very first thing we're going to make sure that doesn't happen is that if you use BrightID, if you link your BrightID to one app and you link your BrightID to another app, nobody gets to see that the same person is using these two apps. No one gets to see that, because we don't want to, because the more you do that, the more it just chips away at someone's privacy until you basically have a complete profile of that person and against their will. So we don't do that.
Maybe I'm still a little naive in the way I'm visualizing DID working, but you know what, just from a pure user standpoint, non-technical standpoint, it sure would be great if it addressed kind of all the issues of identity and login, you know, but
yeah. So I think the reason why decentralized identities don't have more adoption is because there's like people don't want to install another wallet, so they don't want to install an identity wallet to manage all of this. And I mean, you could say the same thing about BrightID. Like, why do I have to install another app? Like, why do I have to install BrightID? And people also ask us if there's ways to kind of like hide the fact that BrightID exists, and just use it, but not let the users know that they're using it. But then it always kind of comes back to, you need, for something to be self-sovereign and in your control, you need a way to manage what's being done. So you need a way to like see which apps you've authorized, and to be able to revoke an authorization and things like that. So you need some sort of manager. And I think that's kind of the missing link, is that like a really easy to use manager that's already caught on and a bunch of people are using it, but yet is in your control and not owned by like Google or something. That has yet to catch on. Once that does, I think it's inevitable that people will switch to the IDs. I've been waiting for identity wallets to come along for like 3 years, and I don't know, we've come up with weird solutions in the meantime. Like the Soulbound NFTs we were talking about is kind of like, well, we don't have DIDs yet, we don't have identity wallets yet, but a bunch of people are now using MetaMask. Maybe we can sort of like use MetaMask and Ethereum addresses to accomplish the same thing. So yeah, we're constantly like, I don't know,
Yeah.
trying to do what we can with what is already been adopted, I guess.
I've thought we were almost there with identity wallet since 2017.
Yeah, there's some
So
cool ones, but
I no longer think we're almost there, even though all the time between now and then I did think we were almost there, and it just kept proving to not be true. And I've had a couple of the sort of prototype identity wallet apps.
Yep,
but
me
like too. Right, they've also got the cold start problems. Like there's nothing to put in. Like I don't have any attestations that fit in there. Yeah, so it's a tough thing to get stood up in the first place. There's got to be a compelling thing that you would put in there, and there's got to be a compelling reason why you would want it to be in there. And neither of those are true today. There's nothing you can do. There's nothing to put in there, and even if you did put something in there, there's something to do with it.
Well, here's a quick narrative on that for the Web3, like the Web3 push. Like I see it all the time on social media, username and password for every site, or connect your wallet to Web3. So they're kind of tying your identity to a single wallet in a sense. Yep. And then now you're trading your, anonymity for, access to certain websites. Well, then the catch-22 is like, well, okay, if I have this Soulbound NFT that's tied to my identity, but not really tied to an address, how do I flex that I'm the true owner of it without giving up my anonymity in a sense? Like, it's no catch-22 of like, where does someone draw the line of how much information they're willing to give up versus easier life access and proof of ownership of certain things?
Yeah. So sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that's actually what I think I love about BrightID is because you have to have that piece in the middle that gives them what they want and keeps what they don't need. And that's why I don't think you can totally make it disappear, but kind of like going and signing up and jumping through the hoops for a physical state ID. You just, once you do this, then it would be awesome if that was your digital passport.
Yeah. So I think
IRL.
Yeah, I think kind of the evolution of this is going to be, so going from still logging in with an Ethereum address, but then the site that logs you in will look at that Ethereum address and then tie it back to like a person rather than that Ethereum address, so that if you come back with Ethereum address number 2, and because maybe you've lost access to Ethereum address number 1, it automatically recognizes and says like, okay, this is the same person that logged in before. This is just a different Ethereum address that they're using, and in a way that doesn't like require you to link all your apps together. It doesn't require you to say, okay, because I'm using login with Ethereum on these 10 different apps, now everybody knows that I use these 10 different apps because I had to link them all to the same address. So I can use like address 1 for app 1 and have 10 different addresses that in an anonymous way still link back to the same person, but that doesn't reveal that about doesn't reveal the existence of the other apps to each other. And so and also, and then it does the other thing that I said, which allows you to swap out an address for just one app. So you can say, okay, like this address was compromised, or I don't want to use it anymore for whatever reason, but I still want this app to know that I'm the same person that registered before. So now I'm registering and I'm using this other address. And so it can still use the MetaMask wallet or whatever, Ethereum wallet people want to use. So I think that's the evolution, is that you take whatever tool. It's kind of clunky. I mean, it's definitely would not be as smooth as using an identity wallet, but that's what people are using. So you work with what people are using, and you kind of have this like weird route to the solution that doesn't always follow it doesn't always follow the most sensible way to do things, but it's just like you got to do what's going to get adoption. Like you got to do what already has shown adoption, because otherwise you'll be sitting waiting for identity wallets for another 5 years.
Yeah. So if it needs to be tied to an Ethereum address, but you don't want to disclose and publicize or tie your actual identity to that Ethereum address, couldn't you just have an additional wallet that's like the only thing that I use this particular address for is BrightID? And
Yep.
maybe I'm just,
yeah, no, that's exactly the sort of thing that I'm
way.
suggesting here. That you can say like, okay, it's kind of like creating a throwaway account for
Gotcha. Okay.
It's kind of like creating a throwaway account when you log into a website, like a throwaway email address or something like that. So you create like this one-off Ethereum address that you're only going to use for this one site. Then you log in, but that site can still know that, well, number one, through BrightID, that you're a real person, but also number two, you have a way of if you lose access to that address, you can come back with another new Ethereum address and say, like, this is still me. This is still the same me that logged in before. So I think that's the evolution.
Cool.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to that day. I don't think that that's far off. Like, I think that will hit sooner than identity wallets. When I see other solutions that are talking about, like, tracking people through Soulbound NFTs rather than Ethereum addresses, tracking, like using Ethereum addresses as part of decentralized identities. So, using like allowing people to use their MetaMask to manage a decentralized identifier. Those are interesting things. Like those are like, I think that's the path of least resistance that we're going for.
So Adam, we're at the top of the hour. I'm not 100% sure if we're making an announcement during this meeting.
No, I don't think we're making an announcement, but I've seen some tweets coming out from the BrightID Twitter account saying like, hey, who likes Soulbound NFTs and like, I'm sure by the time this video hits YouTube and people watch it to the end, it will already be released. So yeah, there's some sort of reward coming out for Twitter followers in the form of a Soulbound NFT. So anyways, so go ahead and follow BrightID Twitter if you haven't already done so. And you'll see the instructions for collecting your Soulbound NFT.
Yes.
And it's like the first example of it that I know of, like a real Soulbound NFT. So should be pretty cool to be able to say you're the first one to have one of those. But yeah, we need to go. Top of the hour. Been really good chatting with everybody. Thanks for the great questions. and talk to y'all soon.
All right, see ya.
Thank you.